Good evening. I'm Sandor Desmond, and welcome to episode 6 of Nightmare Theater, an open book club for nightmares. Tonight, we're going to be talking about nightmare interpretation, which will tie in a little bit to themes in nightmares, which was our 4th episode. After that presentation, we're going to get into some Reddit nightmares as usual, and finally, I have a little outro that I created, although that's not really that relevant. I'm just personally excited about it. But let's get right into the presentation. And you can see it. Perfect. Whoops. Right, so today we're going to be talking about interpretation of nightmares. And there's quite a lot here. It's not entirely clear how much of a scientific basis there is for a lot of this, but it's still interesting to see what different people think about this topic. So I wanted to start with basics for Jungian dream interpretation. So this is based on beliefs of the psychologist Carl Jung, but obviously everything in here is to be taken with a grain of salt. Like, there's no word for word answer to, this dream means this 100% of the time. But starting with some of his theories, and then I wanted to get into some of the themes that we talked about in the previous episode, episode 4 that is, sorry. And then I'll compare sort of what the internet, I searched many different places on the internet, and I figured that we should try to find, a consensus as best as we can for some of these different themes that we see. So we'll be doing that next. But starting with what Jung believed. So he thought that everything inside of the dream represents your inner state. So even people in the dream, other people, represent different aspects of yourself. The house, as was mentioned by a commenter a few weeks ago, represents your entire psyche or personality, and animals can represent the instinctive or lower level aspect of the self. Stones, circular objects, these are symbols of the self. The shadow, which is usually the same sex as the dreamer, represents aspects of themselves that they don't want to admit. Not entirely sure how vastly that differs from the animals in a Jungian interpretation of a dream. But the shadow, would be just how it sounds, literally like a dark figure that is the same sex as the dreamer. And then the anima, which is defined as your true self, or something in the dream that leads you to your true self. Jung believed that would be represented by a female figure for women and a male figure for women. What did I just say? A female figure for men and a male figure for women. So it's the opposite of what I actually typed out, unfortunately. But now getting into sort of some of the internet's beliefs about each of these things. So natural disasters, and I included weather in this, these are said to be indicative of the individual having stress or anxiety towards something, although about what can be vague, and it can include things like health, doctor's appointments, giving a presentation, relationships, taking a test, these sorts of things. Related dreams to natural disasters include storms. So these can be like a storm over a city, for example. And this is thought to be brought on by anger or rage that you're feeling inside at the time that you dream, if you're experiencing an inner turmoil or upset. And then apocalypse dreams, which we did talk about previously, these are similar as well, and these can reflect, or you're likely to have these in theory if there's a big change happening in your life. And you're kind of going to notice that for a lot of these. A lot of these are kind of the same thing, because it's not super well known, but some of them are kind of unique, so there should be some interesting tidbits. Seeing the dead. This is another type of nightmare, of course. So can be about people that you know or that you made up. If you see a dead relative, that can be indicative that you're still struggling with grief or letting that person go. If you're seeing a relative dead in a dream that isn't dead in real life, that can indicate that the person, that you feel guilt towards the person, and you have, sorry, there's a constant buzzing in my ear. Never mind. I'll worry about it later. I'll just try to get through this. Sorry. If you have guilt towards not seeing that person for a while, then that could be why you might see someone who's still alive in one of your dreams. When you see people that you don't know, so random people that are dead, like zombies, if you will, this can indicate that you have anxiety about a personal illness. So people with terminal or life-threatening health problems often report experiencing these types of nightmares, seeing random dead people that they don't know. So missing important events. This is something that you'll often see when there are important events that you're concerned about missing. Some of them are a little more straightforward than others. So you have a general feeling of anxiety about failing or coming up short. This is another possibility. Could also be having nightmares about taking tests. If you have these frequently, it can also be indicative of perfectionism. And it can also indicate that you feel that you missed an important opportunity in your life. So these nightmares about being naked, this is another theme, obviously. This is often experienced by people with self-image issues or low self-esteem. It can also be a fear of expressing yourself. Being naked in public specifically may be a fear of being judged by other people. And it can also indicate that you have a feeling of vulnerability or being ashamed of something you said or did in the past. Interestingly enough, dreams about teeth, which are actually fairly common, and I neglected to mention those in episode 4, but dreams about your teeth falling out or grinding your teeth, things of this nature, those are actually pretty common, and they, strangely enough, indicate or are believed to indicate many of the same things that the naked dream does. So specifically being worried of people judging your physical appearance, that's thought to be one of the interpretations for a teeth dream, missing teeth. Other interpretations include anxiety, helplessness, or depressive states, which again is just kind of very general for nightmares. And then also similar to the being naked dream, the interpretation states that you might be struggling to communicate or unable to, you feel like you're unable to express yourself. So again, similar to the nudity dream. Injuries. So in nightmares where you're getting injured, this is often indicative that you're feeling weak or vulnerable in some aspect of your life. And usually this is related to breaking bones in the dream. That's, I think, the most common injury that you see. It's recommended that you identify where you feel weak in the waking world and then maybe working on that as sort of a remedy to these dreams if you're getting dreams where you're getting injured a lot and your bones are breaking. Doesn't matter how many times I test the presentation beforehand, the pictures sometimes don't all show up, and that's just really annoying, but there it is. So nightmares about a person's spouse or significant other leaving, these are actually probably the most rooted in the real world dreams, so they're more straightforward in the interpretation than most others. Usually it just means that you're afraid your partner will cheat on you or leave you or abandon you. And these nightmares can happen both during a relationship or shortly after a breakup. It really is just an abandonment fear, or, you know, it's the dream is usually depicting exactly what the fear is in the first place. Being trapped. So this is very common, of course, for those with claustrophobic anxiety, in which case it's a manifestation of that fear, but it can also happen in individuals without claustrophobia. And in those cases, it's usually thought to indicate that you feel unable to escape from some life situation. And that could include financial problems, being stuck in a dead-end job, being stuck in a toxic relationship, and the nightmare suggests to the viewer that you're not able to reach your full potential due to whatever your circumstances are. Falling. This was another common theme that we discussed in episode 4. So, usually it's born of anxiety about your personal life, just like so many other dreams, or feeling like you're not able to control yourself, which is a bit different from anything we've heard so far. So these anxieties are often due to issues with money, relationships, careers, or some kind of abuse. It can be instead feeling unable to control a certain aspect of your life rather than your entire life. And it's often had by people in positions of power in real life, but they feel like there's one part of their lives that they just can't nail down and they can't get under their control. Another interesting point, though, is in some people, they don't actually mind the falling in their dreams. In this case, it obviously wouldn't be a nightmare, and those people are well equipped to deal with changes in their lives, is how you would interpret that. Another variation of this would be losing control of a car and getting into an accident. In episode 4, we would have called this an accident dream, but in terms of the interpretation, it's considered the same, a lack of control over some aspect of your life. And then as a little fun fact, as you fall asleep and you get that sensation of falling that wakes you up, that's caused by fluid in your inner ear passing through, and then it's mixed with a muscle twitch. And this phenomenon, when you feel like you're about to fall asleep and then you wake up like immediately, this is called a hypnic jerk. So being chased and attacked. This was obviously a very common one that we discussed in episode 4 as well. And these dreams, these are usually caused by a fear of confrontation, or you might be avoiding a person or an issue in your life. It could be a pushy boss, could be a bad teacher, could be an abusive parent, could be an unhealthy relationship. And the bottom line is you have a reluctance to confront these difficult situations. And it's also thought that the manner in which you flee or hide from your pursuer in the dream is the way that you would tend to deal with the confrontation in real life. So if you hide in the dream, or if you run in the dream, or maybe if you like punch the person and then run, these are all indicative of like maybe how your confrontation style, dealing with confrontation, would be different from person to person. And then I included this figure from the paper that we talked about in episode 4, where they looked at who were the actual pursuers in these chasing dreams. And with a bit of this interpretation knowledge, it's kind of interesting to see. Mainly male if the sex was specified. Lots where things weren't specified, animals and creatures, you could almost maybe even call those the same thing. But, you know, maybe the creatures could, for example, represent something now. And we can understand maybe the human males, that represents fear of a confrontation with a male, and then when it's humans in general, but the sex isn't specified, that could be a group of humans, and that could be fear of, or avoiding some like group confrontation, that sort of thing. Snakes. So snake nightmares can have many meanings. The most common belief about snake nightmares is that they're thought to be about healing and transforming of the self. And then as well, dealing with some difficult situation broadly. That could be almost said for any nightmare. I can't say I've ever actually had a nightmare about snakes. Drowning. So a drowning nightmare can indicate that you feel overwhelmed by emotion, or you're repressing desires or thoughts. It can also be representative of a general struggle that's related to literally any aspect of your life, just like any other nightmare. And then a different variation of this that is common is people drowning in tidal waves. And this is the exact same meaning. It's just not only are you having trouble dealing with things in your life, but the emotion that you're feeling towards it is what you're really reacting to in the dream. Dark figures. So dreaming of dark or unknown figures could mean that you're having doubts or uncertainty about your future. So the figure could be a man or not even human in most cases, but there's definitely something predatory about it. And it's thought that you are more likely to have dreams like this if you're experiencing a significant change in your life. Spiders. So depending on the context of the dream, the meaning for spiders can change dramatically, or at least that's what's believed on the internet. Generally, it's thought that seeing a spider in a dream indicates that you feel like an outsider, or you're trying to stay away from something. If in the dream, the spider's web is more the focus than the spider itself, that is thought to indicate that the dreamer is feeling manipulative themselves or feels that they're being manipulated in some aspect of their life. And another fun fact, if you think back to episode 3, when we talked about sleep paralysis and hypnagogic hallucinations, spiders are actually one of the most common hypnagogic hallucinations that people have during their sleep paralysis. House on fire. So if you remember what we talked about on the second slide, in Jungian thought, the house represents the self, and so you may be able to guess what the house on fire might represent. So the symbol of yourself is burning, and that suggests from a dream interpretation perspective that you may be undergoing some massive personal changes. And it's also thought that if you have a recurring dream where your house is burning, or it's on fire every night when you go to sleep, that could mean that you're resisting these changes or trying to stop them from coming into being. Dreams about war, nightmares about war. These represent inner conflict, or that you've argued with someone and you're processing that. Sorry, my fridge makes loud bangs and it scares me sometimes. It could also be compensation for a lack of aggression that you have in real life. And it could also mean then that you would need to be more assertive or aggressive in order to dispel those nightmares. Silent screams. So this is also one that we didn't talk about in episode 4, but we've talked about being unable to move or unable to run, which is the next one. But this one's related to that one, which is why I mentioned it. So a dream where you try to talk or you try to scream, but nobody can hear you or nothing comes out but a faint squeak. This is common, very common nightmare, and it's disturbing. And these dreams are thought to occur if you feel like you haven't been heard in real life. So nothing too out of the ordinary there. But it can also reflect a frustration or a feeling of helplessness that you're having with some situation in your life. So paralysis, being unable to move, as well running in place, or you trying to sprint but your feet barely touch the ground. So very similar to being unable to speak or scream. So it's thought to be associated with the feeling of being stuck within a situation in your life, or that something in your life or about yourself is being suppressed. Death. So dying in dreams in general, and not just dreams where you start to die and then wake up, but dreams where you actually fully die. These indicate that you are anticipating big changes in your life, and they are out of your control, just like many of these other things. And then as a recap, this is what we discussed in episode 4. So this is from that study that looked at differences between males and females, but also just in general what nightmares are more common. And these are, you'll notice if you look at the left column, these are some of the nightmares that we've talked about today. And I won't go over this graph again just because we've looked at it previously. But that is it for the presentation this week. And let me just look at Okay. Let me react to some of these comments. Music down a bit. Okay. Yeah, I actually did turn my microphone down, so that could be what's going on. Because I thought my voice was too loud last week, but I'll try to fix that for next week. My mom used to call me into her study when I was a teenager and provide Jungian dream interpretations. She was studying Jung for her PhD thesis on Beckett. He might say every gender is an aspect of the archetype of being engendered. I feel too stupid to really comment on what that means. I'm not knowledgeable enough, but that's cool that your mom did that. Almost all my nightmares are people I love being sad and me being helpless to assist them, or else I can't reach them, or hear them calling out but I cannot see them. That sounds like you harbor a lot of guilt. My mom used to have silent screaming dreams and not being able to move or trapped and unable to get home. My cat did silent screaming in real life. Interesting. This is when he was taken out to the park and in his carrying case, and he was terrified of being in the park. Wow. I didn't know that was a thing. A cat silent screaming. Yeah, and with your mom having silent screaming dreams. Well, now you know. I guess she felt like she couldn't get something off her chest that she wanted to. All right. Let's get into some Reddit nightmares. This is a post by a user called CB2231. The post is titled, "Some Shadow Guy Infecting My Friends and People at My School." The post reads, "Gosh, it won't sound like much, but this dream was traumatic. I was at school, just going to maths, where we were going to watch a film for some reason. I was waiting outside because I was late yesterday, and before I went in, the lights all randomly turned off and lightning struck, and there was this creature. It started going around the class, biting students. Everyone who wasn't bit was running, and the teacher locked the door and sent everyone downstairs and said he's gonna find out what the creature is. I was running down with my friends when suddenly they looked infected and started chasing me, so I ran. The next thing I know, I'm dodging infected students and a bunch of people are fighting them off. I get a call from my mom and I answer it. Then all of a sudden the school line is split into two. One side is infected and one side for normal people. Sort of like a trashy Disney movie about the zombies and humans, even though I've only ever watched a criticism video on it. I did not know that there was a Disney movie about that. I get lunch and then I get a call from my girlfriend, but I don't answer it because I think we're off fighting. All of a sudden, I see the Shadow Man again, but in 3 forms. The maths teacher, a shadow, and then some deformed version with an arm where its head should be, and an arm in its stomach, and no arms on either side. The maths teacher sends the Shadow Man to chase me, and my first instinct is to find my girlfriend and hide. We go to the music department with 2 others. They go to the main room, but I don't make it as the maths teacher demon form thing heard the door open and is following us. I go to the teacher's office bit, and I try to climb a couple of cabinets to hide behind, trying to make as little noise as possible. But there's thumb tracks on the top cabinet, and they fall off, I think that was supposed to say, causing the maths teacher to come in, even though he almost went past. Then I had a bright idea to attack him, bright is in quotes, with thumbtacks, but he sent his deformed creature in, which grabbed me. Then my dream ended. Writing it out, it doesn't sound as scary, but I probably missed a few bits or something. However, this isn't the first time I dreamt about my school being attacked by some sort of creature, where I either die or stop the creature, and it's freaking me out. There's a lot going on in that one. So that's like, if you think about the themes we just talked about, there's at least like 4 of them there, right? So you have a shadow creature that was about uncertainty, right? Uncertainty about the future. I think I'm remembering that correctly. Being chased, so avoiding some sort of conflict. And he did try to fight it, so that might be like how he deals with conflict. Maybe he like runs away at the start and then bounces back and tries to deal with the conflict. What else? I guess those were the main ones. Just the grotesque nature of the thing. The way he described an arm coming out of its stomach and out of its head. I enjoyed that. Kind of reminded me of one of the bosses in Bloodborne, which is a video game. And then the other comment that I have is, writing it out, it doesn't sound scary, but I promise I probably missed a few bits or something. Yeah, nightmares never sound as scary when you write them out, but they're of course more scary than, most things when you're actually experiencing them. Let's do another one. This is a post by a user called Litte_Ren. The post is titled, Fighting and Attempted Suicide Dream. The post reads, this dream had me teleport to a bunch of random locations and do random stuff, so I'll boil it down to the important parts. Me and my mom were fighting. We were arguing about our relationship. She doesn't believe I love her. She says this to me in real life when we fight, and I try to argue back that I do love her, and I want her to apologize for being so cruel to me in the argument. She cussed at me and said really mean things that she wouldn't say in real life. After we fought, she wanted to take my bedroom door away, so I couldn't take that. So I called my dad and asked to live in his house. My parents are divorced, so this part of the dream is true. I ask my mom if she wants me dead. I ask her if I killed myself, would she care? She reluctantly says no, she doesn't want me dead. Suddenly, the dream switches, and I'm in front of my great-grandparents' old house. They died a long time ago. There's a bunch of electrical equipment on the ground, so I jump on it and shock myself. I pass out. I wake up in a hospital all bandaged up. My mom is there, and she has my brother on FaceTime. He asks me, why did I try to kill myself? My mom is at my bedside, and we are joking and laughing together. The last thing I remember saying to myself is that I'm surprised that I tried to off myself so suddenly, because I can tell when I have a depressive episode come on, and I didn't then. Hang on. Yeah, I mean, that definitely sounds like a bit of an emotionally abusive relationship. She's not running away. Seems very much like it's not a running away theme. Yeah, this one almost seems like too obvious what the nightmare might be about. Just worried about, the relationship with her mom, and maybe, the suicide, I guess, in the dream could be an attempt to try to bring her closer, or make her, realize to like a greater extent what she means to her, like a desire to have her mom realize that, I mean. Another one. Oops. This is a post by a user named Pyro Nickel. The post is titled, Most Terrifying Nightmare I Ever Had. The post reads, It started off pretty normal. I was around 5 years old. It started with me in my bed, so already it feels more real than it is. I had gotten up to go to the fridge and grab some water. I passed by the living room. My parents were watching some type of animated film and acknowledged I had passed by. So I was filling a cup with water, but as I turned to walk back, they're both gone. The only thing there was a one-eyed monster, animated and lively with color, smiling back at me. Suddenly, a strange liquid is coming off the TV, the monster becoming more and more corrupted. More and more, I was starting to worry. He then comes back out of the TV dark shades of red and black, its fleshy and slimy form, as its eyes turned black. The lights turn off, and at this point, I ran to the room I went to when I cried, the bathroom, and locked the door and fit into a cabinet. As I looked through the tiniest hole to see the liquid oozing from the door, I began to sob. My child brain couldn't help but be scared, being put in this position. It feels like this hours before I look through the hole again, and it's gone. As I step out and look at the mirror, I feel this sense of overcoming happiness. The last part of the dream. I hear a screech and flash of darkness just before being jerked up out of bed to the sound of my alarm. I couldn't walk past a black TV for months, and I still remember it 8 years later. I think that she meant overwhelming happiness after the monster's gone. Yeah, so there we've definitely got a monster. We've got hiding, so that could be the hiding from the problems theme, if you recall the presentation. I wonder what the monster could represent. The parents are gone, and that's just before the one-eyed monster appears, and it comes out of the TV. I mean, it's hard to imagine that a child would be thinking about the dangers of, too much TV watching or something like that. So that doesn't seem like that could be it. Hard to say. 5 years old when they had that one. I mean, it could be a nightmare just about something taking your parents and what that thing could be. And it's just a crazy monster. Oh, or maybe it could be that at the time when they were 5, they felt like maybe their parents watched a lot of TV, and maybe they associated the TV itself as being a monster because it's taking the parents' attention away. Again, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm just playing nightmare interpreter here after reading that presentation. Seems like a possibility. Let's do another one. This is a post by a user called Depressed Eshe. The post is titled Really Weird Experience / Nightmare. The post reads, "This might not make any sense and isn't really classified as a nightmare, as I wasn't fully asleep, but I was just wondering if anyone has experienced this before and knows what it's called. Usually when I'm sick with a cold or fever, I get these really weird episodes in the night. It's hard to describe, but when I go to bed, I'm in between being asleep and being awake, and I get these visions in my head where everything is so rough and messy, and it's like there's a constant image in front of me that is just scribble and makes you so stressed to the point where you're having a panic attack, crying and pacing around the room in real life. I feel so trapped and hide in the corner of my room or down the hallway because I can't escape. But then that rough image in your head turns smooth and wavy out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you feel a rush of relaxation. When I finally feel this calmingness, I just sit on my bed and zone out, usually staring at one of the nearest light sources for ages. But then, before I know it, it's back to being rough and stressed. And then it just keeps going back and forth. Anyways, I hope that makes sense. But I was just wondering, what is that? Maybe it could be a common thing everyone gets when they're sick? Not sure. I mean, I've never had anything quite like that personally. Yeah, I have where I'm about to fall asleep and I feel like I'm falling, or I have where I'm about to fall asleep and then a big ugly face shows up right in front of my eyes, but I've never had where my vision is actually distorted for an extended period of time while awake. In the comments, or in my chat, it suggests that it could be a weird inner ear congestion due to the cold. I don't have any experience with that personally. This is a post by a user called I Fear Talking Toys. Fair enough. The post is titled, My nightmare seems to continue to the next time I sleep. Oh, that's cool. The post reads, a few hours ago, I had a nightmare of sleeping outside in the house. I had just moved out of, and whenever I couldn't sleep because of noises and clanking metal approaching me fast. I was the only one sleeping outside, by the way. So I did what anyone would do in a nightmare. I ran to wake up my brother, who was in my mom's car, and ran into the house with him. And whenever I did, I woke up and told myself that it wasn't real, and I went back to bed, literally continuing us running in the house, and me looking to hide somewhere where I snagged my tablet and was going to play some games to calm me down. And then I turn on the tablet and creepy faces flash on the screen with text saying, cut the wire. And then I look over at the tablet's built-in charger, and it has already been cut. I just woke up right now, and this got on to post this, but I really don't want to go back to sleep in case this continues. The nightmare seems to get worse each time I sleep, and I don't want to get to the point of me crying every time I wake up. I think that's such a cool concept. Like a nightmare that just continues while you're where you left off. The thing that actually creeped me out of reading this one, though, as well, is that it's not just picking up where he left off. It also seems like perhaps when he's in the waking world, him in the nightmare is still acting in the dream, because of that whole cut the wire thing. So it was telling him to cut the wire, and then he goes and looks at the wire, and it's already been cut. Maybe him in the dream had already done that while he was awake. And, that's a very freaky interpretation. Obviously, that's not, based on anything real. But that'd be a good, horror movie plot, for example. Just the dream continues whether you're asleep or not. So you might as well be there taking action. Because otherwise he just keeps waking up into a worse situation. Falling asleep into a worse situation. You had that dream the other night. You had a really long dream that the dog woke you up, and then you went back to sleep half an hour later and right back into the same dream. Wow. Yeah, I don't think I've ever had that. That is scary, though. Just the thought that the monster's waiting for you there. Yeah, I've never had that before. In terms of the interpretation of the dream, or the themes, what was the monster? Clanking metal. I'm not sure. Maybe it doesn't say what the monster is. Anyway, let's read another one. This is a post by Slurp365. The post is titled, Nightmare, Then Just a Weird Dream. The post reads, I had a dream where this evil family kidnapped me and two other people and tortured us and raped us and killed one of us, and me and someone else got away, but they lived in a certain house, so I was always haunted by them, and they were always stalking me. Then I found out the same thing happened to my younger cousin, and we were crying and hugging. At the same time, I was in college classes, and I was in art, and my brother and his girlfriend, so I would have them walk me to class because I was scared of getting kidnapped again. And then me, my boyfriend, and this old friend were all in history together, and forgetting to do my assignments because I forgot I was in college. So I got back to this half essay I wrote that was really bad and gave but the teacher gave me a 99, so I was like, oh cool, as long as I do my work I'll get good grades. So there's definitely a very sharp turn in the direction the dream took about halfway through. It almost became like a dream about being tested or something like that. But yeah, this is kind of a hard one to follow, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, but she's not actually worried about being tested because the teacher gave her a 99. So I guess then what I would take from this is that the dream was almost like sorting through every one of her beliefs and every one of her fears and deciding which ones to keep and which not. And getting kidnapped is certainly up there on the list. Yeah, freaky. The psyche may have found the dream so useful that it revisited it. Or maybe aren't dreams at all when it happens. LOL. Maybe these are parallel worlds. That was what I was thinking. This is, of course, referring to the previous nightmare that I read. I like that idea, though, also that the psyche may have found the dream so useful that it revisited it. But it didn't revisit it from the beginning, which is what it would normally do, right? With like a recurring dream. It picks it up where it left off. That's cool. I wish I could do that, honestly, because there's a lot of dreams where it's a very satisfying dream. This is not usually nightmares, but I want to find out how it ends, and then I never quite get to. And sometimes I can like force myself back to sleep to like find out the end. But yeah, I wish that I could sometimes, go back. Especially a lot of my like nightmares, I do kind of become semi-lucid at the end, but I don't quite manage to fully wrap it up as much as I'd like. All right, let's find one. Let's try this one. This is a post by a user called PandaMoo98. The post is titled, "I hate this feeling." The post reads, "Hi guys, I'm new here. I want to make a post about this feeling I get in nightmares. My boyfriend never dreams, and my mom have very, very different types of nightmares, more gory. So I want to know if it's just me or if you guys get this feeling too. The thing is that my nightmares are often really dumb. When I try to tell my boyfriend my nightmares, they don't sound scary at all. But what makes them really scary to me is this feeling of absolute infinite sadness, horror, or hopelessness. For example, I had a nightmare about falling asleep and waking up really late, like 8 p.m., like a nap that got out of hand. In the dream, I realized that my mom didn't come back from work. Now I usually will get kinda anxious and try to call her, but in the nightmare, I feel like this feeling that I'm never going to see her again, like time is getting longer and longer, like I'm getting my worst anxiety attack. I have nightmares quite often, maybe 4 times a week, and it's always the same feeling. I hate it because I wake up and I still have those feelings for some seconds, and it's kinda tiring. Sorry for the long post. I just needed to get this off my chest." I mean, that almost sounds like an attachment trauma from early childhood. Again, I'm not a psychologist, but that's how it sounds to me. Yeah, just that fear of abandonment of her mother. And she did say that even in real life, she would get anxious in that situation and think to call her mother. And it feels like the time is just getting longer and longer. I don't think I've ever had that feeling in a nightmare, but I do have a similar feeling when she describes I will never see her again, and then she says it's like time is getting longer and longer, like I'm getting the worst anxiety attack. I have had while awake where I think about the concept of death and like my consciousness ceasing to exist, and when I think about that for long enough, I just kind of get this like, well, what's after death? And then I like just trying to imagine my consciousness not existing, which is like my brain is trying to imagine it as something other than what it's like to be asleep and not dream, right? It's trying to imagine it as something other than nothing, and it just feels like I'm sinking into my like self or into my mattress, and and then that is like a form of panic attack, I guess. But again, never really had that in a dream, but I wonder if that's a similar feeling. This is a post by a user called Raindroplet Bob. The post is titled, "I had a nightmare that came back 3 times after waking up last night." The post reads, Phase 1. I was talking to a handsome guy at school. I was going to because he had been taking pictures of me, and I was curious as to why, so I went to confront him. He started paying a lot of attention to me after that, and all the girls were warning me not to fall for him. That he was very, very dangerous. He gave me a number, and what Phase 1 ends. Phase 2 of the dream. The guy and I end up having sex, and I later find out he recorded it all. Feeling uneasy, I ask him to leave. He prompts me, "They'll be here soon." That's what he said to her. Phase 3 of the dream. I wake up in a bunk bed that looks impossible to climb. I'm watching a TV when this show comes up, and it's a man with really thin, very demonic-looking women, and he's examining their eyes and teeth. Then again, "They'll be here for you soon." I assume the man in the TV said that. Phase 4 of the dream. I'm in a dark room, and these people are threatening me. They told me to chug a gallon of water, chug a 24 case of beer, and something else. While I'm chugging these things, they shoot my dog. I finish this competitive chug and quickly run to my dog. They tell me I was lucky I finished because this would have been me, and then they shot my dog again. Phase 5 of the dream. They're taking me back home. I wake up. Wow. Certainly a lot in that one in terms of themes and interpretation that we could do. One thing that I'm a bit confused about is when it says that the nightmare came back 3 times after waking up. I wonder if that means she had that exact nightmare 3 times in one night, which is very wild, especially considering how many different moving parts there are to it. So I mean, breaking down like each phase of the dream. So there's a handsome guy that isn't to be trusted. I wonder if that is based on a real life individual that she knows at her school. But the other part that I thought there in terms of interpretation was the being naked and embarrassed part, right? Because he records her while they're having sex without her knowledge, which could be, in terms of nightmare interpretation, that could suggest some form of belief that, insecurity or about physical appearance or something. That's what the research that I did earlier today would suggest. And then there's a part with teeth, again, examining eyes and teeth, and it's very demonic looking women. That's interesting. It's not her though. So as we discussed in the presentation, the teeth thing is also supposed to be insecurity about physical appearance, or that's supposed to be what might be related. It might be related to, but again, it's not her that's being examined in this case. So that's kind of interesting. I'm not really sure what "they'll be here for you soon" could be referring to. But then in phase 4, that took a much different turn, of course. So now this is where, her dog is being murdered essentially. And I mean, that's just pretty terrible in and of itself. And perhaps that could just be about a fear that, something could happen to her dog, or maybe her dog had some medical problems or whatnot. One thing that is kind of interesting in the dream, and obviously you can't really judge people's actions in nightmares, but they shoot her dog and she continues finishing the chugging competition, and that kind of, I found that like mildly humorous, but obviously it's just nightmare decision making, so you can't really can't really judge somebody for that. They're taking me back home in phase 5, and I wonder if that's sort of like the repeat of the cycle. Maybe she feels like she's trapped in some sort of cycle related to these things. Hard to know. This is a post by a user called Just Monica. The post is titled, "What the fuck is wrong with my brain?" The post reads, "So basically, my nightmare started off normal-ish. I was just in a sort of game, but I wasn't. It was like a game where other people were killing each other, but it wasn't actually killing them, but would just sort of eliminate them, like dying in a game. You would be put in a waiting room for the next round. But when there was just me and this other guy, it all of a sudden changed to my actual life or death scenario, and tried to throw my weapon at him and scraped him, but then he pinned me and tried to force a knife down my throat, which I caught with my teeth. Somehow, I was trying to buy time till he passed out from the scrape of my knife, but then he was able to force a saw down my throat and somehow cut my vocal cord or something, and I started to choke on my own blood and died. I then woke up, and I could sort of feel a pain. I guess that's something I don't really know." So first thought there is that guy needs to learn how to fight, because you don't there's easier ways to kill someone than by putting the weapon down their throat. But there's a lot of themes in there as well. So another thing that it reminded me of, actually, when it switched from the first paragraph to the second paragraph, because there's like a game and she's just watching these people dying, and then once it's her turn she realizes that it's her real life. And that reminded me a lot of Ender's Game, the novel and the movie, if you've seen it, where it's a science fiction where this like boy genius is put into this game, and the goal is to train him to become a great general so that they can defeat this alien species that's trying to wipe out humanity. And basically it turns out at the end of the book that the game was real all along, and he's just been actually killing, you know, all these aliens, like leading the army this entire time, and they destroyed, you know, like their home world and all that type of stuff. And yeah, I don't know, it could also be maybe a feeling of guilt, like maybe she feels like she's taking actions on other people, and it doesn't seem, she's not seeing the consequences of it directly, but then when those same things are happening to her, she is feeling the consequences of it, and it could perhaps be a feeling of guilt. And then there was another theme that I thought, oh yeah, he cut her vocal cords out. I wonder if that could be related to the theme that we discussed earlier of feeling like you can't speak, or the silent scream. I wonder if there's something that she feels like she needs to say but she can't. That's an interesting one. There was a lot in there. This is a long one. You know what? Let's just do one long one to end it out. I'm feeling it. It's got a lot of upvotes. This is by a user called Heart-Headed. The post is titled, "Worst Nightmare in Years. I'm Shaking." The post reads, "It's just before 6 a.m. where I live, and I'm shook. Cannot go back to sleep. Fuzzy now in the details, but the horrors are stuck with me. I'm on a plane with my dad, a stranger, and her young daughter, maybe about 4. The pilot is having trouble landing. Outside, the world is colored like an 80s vaporware video with jagged mountains and swirling fog. The woman is behind me, holding her child up to the window when the plane takes a deep dip and the window flies open. The little girl is essentially ripped apart while the woman screams, clinging to the bloody bits of her kid while the rest are carried out of the plane. Just gore. Fast forward a little bit of anxious flying around. The woman is wailing in the background, and we manage to land. We're in my parents' house. The woman and the pilot have left somehow. It's fuzzy. There's another kid here now. Maybe the same kid? And it's just me, her, and my dad. My dad is in good spirits. He tells me that he's moving out of the house, implying that he and my mother are divorcing. This initially surprises me, but in the dream state I just kind of roll with it, telling myself that it must have slipped my mind. Dad asks me if I'll go shopping for new home decor with him, which I took as a sweet gesture. I tell him of course I will. He has to go to his car for something, and he's still joking about his terrible decorating skills as he swings open the front door. Intense panic when I see 2 armed men standing right outside. They immediately raise their guns to point at my dad and I. I don't think I've ever been more afraid in my life. I think I just want to scream, but I can only gasp, "Oh my God," and move in the front door of the little girl who's still here for some reason. The men let themselves in through the open door. One has a kind of long gun, and the other is carrying a pistol. One of you needs to get out. Let me try that again. One of you needs to go get all the jewelry right now, long gun guy says. Dad scrambles up the stairs, practically on all fours. The men keep their weapons on me, and the kid. Keep your hands where I can see them. Is there anyone else? I shake my head furiously. I want to cry, I'm so scared. Dad returns from upstairs and approaches them. Before I realize what's happening, he's pulled out a pistol and has it against the long-armed guy's head. Pistol guy quickly shoots my dad in the skull and he collapses on the floor. Last thing I remember before I wake up is the blood trickling down his face. He is most certainly dead. This is the scariest part. I'm half awake now, and I realize that I've just had a nightmare. My eyes crack open in a daze, and I think I see a shadow from behind me on the wall before me, shifting out of the light. At the same time, I hear the unmistakable sound of a glass sliding door closing. Panic again. There's someone in my house. It takes a moment for me to remember where I am, and that I don't have a sliding glass door there. Still, I'm completely paralyzed with fear for another minute. Finally, managed to pull myself out of bed and went around checking all my locks. Now I'm scared to go back to sleep. It's moments like these that I wish I didn't live alone. I'm having a drink at dawn today. So it's always, I always feel appreciative to get or to find a nice, well-written one like that. Again, there's a lot there. Yeah, we don't have any write-ins this week. Sorry, just talking to the chat. But yeah, a lot there again. So I wonder if that could be a fear of flying. Definitely a very horrific open there with the little girl flying out the window. And then possibly a feeling of needing to reach out to the dad. I've had dreams like that before, though, where there's like a hostage scenario with my family and like all of my decisions are super important, and like it's just extremely stressful and terrifying, and the pressure is really on, and you know that like every decision you make could be, could result in a life or death of somebody that you care about within seconds. That's very scary. I wonder if that's a feeling of like putting pressure on yourself or believing that you have to carry out something. But then at the very end, I did see another theme, which was very briefly, she has a false awakening. I believe it's a false awakening in the dream. She realizes that she's had a nightmare, but it sounds like it's still a dream. So it's like a semi-lucid, perhaps, false awakening. I didn't think that was real life anyway. I could be wrong. That could have just been real life. But yeah, then she sees a shadow. And I'm not sure if that's, the shadow behind her on the wall. And I'm not sure if that's supposed to be a potential, guy with a gun again, or if that is supposed to be just one of those shadowy figures, which could suggest uncertainty. So I think that the main vibe that I get from this dream is uncertainty. That's the main takeaway. Like uncertainty, especially with not knowing what decisions she should be making in that like tough situation, and then the presence of the shadow. which I'm choosing to interpret as more of the supernatural sense than an actual person in the room, but I could be wrong. Anyway, that was a great one. And that is about all the time we have for today. Again, to the chat, there are no write-ins this week. But please, if you would like, send your nightmares to theforgottengrove@gmail.com, and I would love to read them next week and interpret them to the best of my ability. What else? I don't actually know yet what presentation I'm going to go with next week. It could be some of those not sleep paralysis, the sleepwalking homicide stories. I think that could be an interesting presentation, but I haven't decided yet. Also, if you have a suggestion for a topic that you'd like to see presented, feel free to email me at the Forgotten Grove about that as well. I've been Sandor Desmond with the Forgotten Grove, and this has been Nightmare Theater Episode 6, an open book club for nightmares. And until next time, embrace the beautiful dark.